Hi and welcome to another video. Today this is like a part 2. In part 1 we talked about a 3-line display for Raspberry Pi, which I've got here in this housing. So you can see your IP address, the local name, memory usage, etc., which is quite a handy little thing. You can also do a safe shutdown or reboot via this button here. We're moving on a little bit. As you can see, I've actually added it to my Tukkari enclosure. I've got a Prusa Mini here. So I've added a temperature control which controls the extractor fan on it. It will also control the lighting as well. So that's pretty handy. So if these sort of things interest you, firstly have a look at part 1 to see how I've done the 3-line display, and then we'll move on to the next part. So the Pi is now bolted onto the faceplate, diagonally two bolts on the faceplate going through to the Pi, and then 2 standoffs diagonally for the relay hat. And with the relay hat you've got 3 relays there and 3 yellow jumpers, and I've transposed excuse me, all of the wires from the Pi onto the relay hat, so please look at the first video to establish exactly where those wires should be. With regard to the jumpers on the relay, there is a possibility that one of the pins for the jumpers is already used by those wires, so we need to remove one of those jumpers in a minute. And the blue wire is the one that I couldn't remove because that goes directly onto the main board, so that one has to stay there. It gets a little bit squashed by the hat when the hat goes on, but it is just about passable. So here we have the back, and I've put 4 square nuts into the corners, and then it's a case of putting the power supply, 12-volt power supply socket in, just with a nut and a washer to secure it. Here I'm going to add a master switch to the base for all the 12-volt items, and the negative terminal from the 12-volt input will go to that and be switched. So let's just pop the switch in. That will be connected via some spade connectors. You could solder it direct, but I'm going to use spade connectors. And so the negative wire there is going to go onto one of the terminals on the switch, and then another negative wire from the switch to the rest of the device. So there is a switch all wired in, so we've got the negative from the 12-volt input to the switch, and then coming from the switch out. And I'm using some heat shrink to cover all the exposed cables. There, we've got the heat shrink there. And of course you need some crimpers if you're going to crimp the spade connectors. All of that will be at the end of the video for all the parts. So for the positive cable, I'm just going to use one of these little plastic connectors. In fact, I'll probably use one on each. So the positive cable coming out there and the negative, just so I can connect all the positives and all the negatives together. So next I'm going to attach a cable for the lighting. So my lighting actually has got a socket, a 12-volt socket attached to the printer, but equally you may just have a cable, in which case you might just be using some connectors, in which case you could just attach one of these connectors, perhaps with the extended wires. Mine is quite long because it's going to go around the back of the enclosure, around the side and into the enclosure. So we're just going to pop this wire So there's the negative of the cable that's going to the LEDs of the enclosure, and I've got an extra piece of wire here as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pop this negative straight into one of the relays. The one that's here, hopefully you can see it's a normally open contact. The other one I'm going to pop into the center common and join it to our main negative here. So let's try doing that. The positive wire will be going into the positive supply. So we have the positive input here, so the positive will be joining there. But again, we've got another wire to put into the positive. So we'll get that on now. So just to go through, this is the wire going to the LEDs. Positive will be sorted in a minute. The negative wire goes into the normally open right hand relay, and then from the switch we have an extra bit of cable. Don't worry about that that there, because we are going to actually be putting a second wire in there anyway, but from the switch it goes into the common there. So the item we've been waiting for is the temperature control unit. That actually has built-in relays, so we'll only end up using one relay on the board for the Pi. Two others will be redundant. The switching of the fan on and off will be from the relay here. So we have positive and negative to supply the actual display. Those will be coming off of these terminals, which is why I mentioned we've got another wire to pop in. So positive, negative, a small lead going into those, and then negative will go onto one of those as well, and the fan positive will go onto here. So let's try and wire that one up. Now, just something else I'm going to add in is an on-off switch for the display and fan. That's actually going to go here. So I've just put a couple of negative wires there, and I'm just going to pop it on, and I'm going to use some hot glue to seal it in. Best do that now. So I'm now going to attach one of those switch wires to the negative of the temperature module. That's nice and tight. We also need to make sure there's a positive loop on this relay terminal, so fan positive will come in on this terminal. We'll have this piece of wire then going to the main positive, and this will only switch when the relay is on. It creates a circuit straight through to the fan. There will be a circuit diagram at the end, and I'm going to go through the wiring in a moment as well, point by point, once it's completed. So I'm going to do that now, pop this wire in, join all the positives to the main positive, connect the fan up. I have this is my fan cable here, positive and negative, and the lighting, and we'll just go through each point. Okay, so let's go through it. I've missed a couple of steps in the video, so I want to go step by step. So first of all, there's a 12-volt input socket there, which goes along here to this joiner. So we've got positive here. One of the positives goes to this cable coming out. This cable actually goes to the LED lighting. Now, I've got that, as I mentioned before, terminating in a 12-volt socket, but you may have one of these sort of joiners or something like that just to join up with your LED lighting. The other positive goes to the positive terminal on the temperature sensor display. I've also got a second wire in the positive of the temperature sensor display. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit to let's just a little bit more. So that positive goes to the top of the positive relay contact. Let's move that out of the way. So it goes into here, and I've got a positive coming out. Then this positive cable here goes out, and that will go to your fan, positive to your fan. I've got a Noctua fan with a speed controller that I've just put on the side. So my positive goes into here, and my Noctua will join onto this end here. If you've just got a positive and negative, so your positive is going to join up with the positive on your fan. Right, let's have a look at the negative supply. So the negative cable goes to the switch. Let's see if we can focus in on the switch. So we've got a switch there. So that'll be a master on off for the whole unit, apart from the Pi, because it's got a separate power feed. So the negative from the 12-volt socket comes in, goes to the switch. It comes back out of the switch, and it goes to this little connector here, which has got 3 wires on it. The first wire is the negative for the fan. So again, mine's going to not to a speed controller. You don't need that. That can just go to the negative of your fan. Just as I've got a fan there, and you've just got 2 wires, positive and negative. And I always recommend using a high pressure fan like the Noctua IPPC 3000 or similar for an enclosure. Anyway, that's one wire. Second wire goes to the little switch here that we glued in. So that's that little slider switch on the front. That in turn then goes to the negative of the temperature sensor. So by turning that slider on and off, we can actually turn off the temperature sensor completely. So that will turn the fan and the temperature sensor off if you don't actually want it on. So it's quite a handy thing. The third black cable goes to this relay, and it goes to the center, and from the relay on the normally open contact we have the LED lighting. So what we can do, we can use something like Octa relay to activate this relay when the print starts, and deactivate it when the print finishes. So that's an easy way of turning the light on and off. I also have a manual switch on the actual lighting itself, so I can override that if I need to. The only thing I haven't mentioned is the actual temperature sensor, which fits here, and that will then plug in there, and it will come out of the side here. So the next step is to carefully fold these wires, put the back onto the front. I'll attach the sensor, and hopefully we will see it all working. Remember, details about all the items I've used will be at the end of the video. So the box is all buttoned up, screwed down with the four 3mm bolts. Here we have the socket for the power supply, which is coming from a power brick. So that's 12 volts going in there. This is the positive and negative going to the lighting, and that goes directly to the lighting attached to the printer I've got, and I'll show you that in a moment. This is the temperature sensor cable that we mentioned before. We have the positive and negative wire coming out, which can go directly to your fan, or in my case a Noctua power controller, and that then goes directly off to the Noctua fan. A couple of extra items. One is a power supply for the Raspberry Pi. That is going to go in here. The power supply directly goes into there for the Pi, and finally a USB connector going to the printer so it can control the printer with Octoprint, so that will go there. And of course, if you've got a webcam, you'll be able to plug that in as well and set that up. So here's a shot of the back of the enclosure. So we've got the Noctua IPPC 3000 fan, and I've also got a vent shroud or vent director, because this is going to be directly against the wall, so it ensures there is a gap all the way around the fan, and it blows the fan's air to the sides. So that's that connector there. Additionally, the actual box will be mounted to a bracket on the side of the enclosure. Now, because it's a Tukkari plexiglass enclosure, I didn't want to go and mount the actual box somewhere where it's going to look really odd. I like the clear lines of the plexi. So we've got a bracket there, and the box is going to mount out the back, and we'll show you that in a moment. I've also got lighting, as you can see, attached to the printer, and whether you can see that or not there, the smaller cable is a cable coming from the controller box going into the back of the printer, and that's actually connecting to the lighting. So that's where my 12 volt lighting goes. Yours may equally go just directly to your LEDs that may be mounted on your enclosure. So you can use any enclosure for this mod. It doesn't have to be of plexiglass, it could be wooden, could be anything really. So the control box is now bolted onto the back, onto this bracket that I've got mounted here. The STL for the bracket is included at the end of the video. Again, everything will be included. Next thing I've got is just the temperature controller. I'm just going to slot that in to the enclosure, and hopefully, if I've got enough slack, which I should do, I've just got a little mount for it to slide on. So it's just going to stay at the top there. We have the 12 volt power, which is going to go on the inside. So that's just going to go here. And finally, I'm just going to connect the USB for the printer control, and that will go underneath. So we're almost at the end. We do have to still do the configuration for Octoprint for Octorelay, so that the actual lighting will automatically turn on and off. But let's have a look and see how all of this will go. Okay, so we've got the temperature sensor turned on, and I'm just going to, I've got an inline switch for the Raspberry Pi, and I'm just going to turn the power on here. So that's fired up. If I just press the button, and there we go, IP address, etc. So I can see what the IP address is being used at the moment. And I can set the temperature control here. At the moment it's set to 30 degrees. You can also set the humidity as well, should you wish to use that as a switch. But it's set at 30 and the fan will cut in and out at 30. So here's Octoprint. I've used the IP from the 3-line display to make sure I get into the Octoprint installation straight away. So the next thing is going into the plugin manager. We're going to find Octa Relay. So get more, type in Octa Relay and then install it. Takes a few seconds. And we do need to restart. Back into Octoprint again, going to go back and see where Octa Relay is and set it up. And relay number 1 is active. We've got a label as light and that's what it's going to be, our LED, so that's fine. The GPIO number, we need to set it to the correct number, not necessarily the number that's on the board, which was 29 on the board. It's actually GPIO pin 21, which represents number 29 on the board. And we're just going to have a quick look now. And that very bottom pin is showing us GPIO pin 21 there. But it's actually printed as 29 on the board that I've got on the relay hat. You don't have to have it initially on boot coming on. I've just done that for when I'm going to test it. But you want it to come on before printing and off after printing, and a 10-second delay I've got after it finishes printing, and then the relay will activate and the light will turn off. And there is a little light bulb icon that we can manually turn the light on and off if we want to. So that's concluding setting up Octa Relay to activate one of the relays. So guys, I hope this has been a useful video to show you how to add a temperature control unit, Raspberry Pi, and this new little 3-line display so you can see the status of your Raspberry Pi, IP address, etc. I found it really good for the Tukkari plexiglass enclosure, because I didn't really want to spoil the look of the enclosure, but you can add it to any enclosure that you've got, whether it be solid, wood or whatever. And again, STLs are all available to download. You can adjust it and modify it how you like, probably do a better job than I have done. And remember, if you haven't got an extract fan facility in your enclosure at the moment, I do have a dedicated video on how to fit a extractor fan. It includes all the STL files, so please have a look. I'll put a link in the description below so you can have a look at that. So a lot of people have found that very useful. So if the video was educational, please give me a like and subscribe. That'd be really handy, and I hope to see you next time.